Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host as always, Alex, and with me tonight I have Dan.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad, certainly a lot better after the last couple of results. The last time we spoke, we'd just come off a pretty disappointing defeat to Everton, and we'd sort of spoke about the need to bounce back and to at least take 4 points against West Ham and Middlesbrough. And of course we went and did one better and got both wins in the game. So we'll start off talking about the West Ham game, and then we'll talk about the wonderful Middlesbrough result that we've just had this morning. But first of all, what were your thoughts on the West Ham game?
The West Ham game. That was it. It went. I mean, as well as I could have hoped. I mean, we did. We picked the result. We picked the result. Picked the win. The opening goal, was concerning. The way it came about. And Davies just leaving Carroll on his own. But I think the first half we struggled, and whatever Silva said at half time obviously worked, and the changes that he made, changing to a 4-4-2, the players really seemed to respond to that. And the last 120 minutes of football from Hull City has been outstanding, the best I've seen in a long time.
And it's amazing because we sort of spoke about this dilemma of whether they go two up front or whether they go one up top, and we spoke about the fact that Silva likes to sort of set the tempo his way, and then he'll throw on a player to change the tempo and change something and to get a result. And whilst I was perhaps wrong in saying that he'd go one up top, at least the second part of that seemed to ring true, where he did make that change at halftime, as you say. He brought on Grzycki for Davies, who'd had a pretty poor game, and we'll talk about that in a second. But bringing on Grzycki just completely changed the game, and it's sort of becoming a habit under Silva, and we'll talk about the Borough game where it happened again. But coming from a losing position has now happened 3 times under Silva in only, what is it now, 11 or 12 games? So it's a pretty remarkable stat, and it shows a lot of intensity and determination in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing obviously Silva's built on was even all this year there's a lot of talk about, as a squad, our fighting spirit and trying to keep the togetherness going and sticking it out for their mates and everything. And I think Silva's managed to build on that, and just take it that little step further, where all the players now can actually convert that into positive results.
And then, of course, Davies was sort of the odd man out, being subbed off at halftime for Grzycki to make way for that more attacking lineup. And I guess it's a bit concerning for him because he's had a few poorer games under Silva, and certainly seems to be the one defender on the outer. We talked about the fact that if we do play 3 at the back, or if we do play 2 at the back, now that we have 4 fit centre backs who are all top quality players and have all produced top quality football for us, the dilemma was always going to be who was left out, and it looks like Davies, at least at the moment, is the one on the outer.
Yeah, it seems that way, and I like, you got to look, like, I mean, we're talking about West Ham, but you look at the Borough game. As soon as Dawson was deemed fit enough to play, he was straight into the squad, the matchday squad, and Davies was out. So that is a pretty clear indication of where Davies is at the moment. In saying that, like, he's not. He's made a couple of mistakes in his couple of outings that he's had since he's come back from injury, but by no means is he completely out of the equation for the run-in.
Yeah, well, I think all the players are going to need all hands on deck for the run-in because we've got a fair few important games coming up. It was also a pretty notable result because we've had 2 defenders score our goals in Robertson and Ranocchia, both obviously first goals for the club in the Premier League. Ranocchia for his first goal in 2 years, and feels like only yesterday we had our episode talking about Robertson and the fact that, yeah, of course he scored in the playoff semi-final against Derby, but yeah, getting a first Premier League goal for us. So talk us through the goals and how you saw them.
The Robertson's goal was brilliant, and it seems to be the goal from our left back, because I remember Tymon's goal that he scored was
shout.
Almost identical, like from
Against
that
Swansea,
that same sort of position, and just fired it in across the goal into the bottom corner. But that goal from the first goal was brilliant. Great build up, started by Markovic, and He was been outstanding the last couple of games as well, but started by him, a nice little bit of quick passing, and then it went into Grzycki, and there's a bit of talk that maybe it wasn't intentional, that he was trying to cut inside the player and it was a heavy touch. But I thought about that and I went and I watched the highlights. I watched that goal.
It looks
about
like it's
6 or
a pretty
7.
deliberate poke.
Yeah, I looked at it about 6 or 7 times and I thought, and I was thinking about how Grosicki normally plays, and I thought in that position he normally would try and go out and around the player, get to the byline, use his pace, and then cut it back from there. When he's that narrow in, and the way he was facing everything, I don't think he would have tried to cut inside like that there. And Robertson was making a very deliberate run. There would had to have. I guarantee there was a call coming, and I think it did seem very deliberate. I think it might have been a little bit further than Robertson was expecting because he made the run and then he sort of has to change his stride a little bit. But look, it was brilliant. Like, you can't deny it. It was a great ball and Robertson, great run and a great finish.
And then a great header for Ranocchia for the second, both assisted by Grosicki. So finally seeing him deliver a pretty good corner. I mean, we've sort of spoken about the fact that since Snodgrass left, our set-piece delivery has not been great. And of course we had another great set-piece this morning. But good to see Grosicki getting a good corner in.
Yeah, I think I heard this morning that they said that Grosicki now is now the leading assist, or has most assists for Hull City this season. So, and he's only been here since he made his debut in February. So he's been here 2 months and is now top of the assists for us. So I think that show is starting. He's starting to fulfil his potential. And he came out last week and said, I've not been at the standard that I have set for myself. I need to do better for this club, and I'm going to try and do better. And I think he is. He's really starting to show what he can do when he's in those positions.
Would Grosicki have been your man of the match against West Ham?
He would. I mean, he'd be up. He has to be in the discussion purely based on the impact that he had on the game when he came on. But I actually had Ranocchia as my man of the match, not only for the brilliant goal, which puts many a centre forward to shame with a perfect run and a perfect header, but I think he had a very solid shift at the back, and his height was essential in shutting down a number of West Ham's crosses and a number of their attacks. And I thought he helped to really limit Carroll's effectiveness, particularly in the second half once we dropped to a 2 and Davies wasn't marking him anymore.
And it's pretty amazing to think as well, Ranocchia, I think it was in the first half, took a pretty bad knock and looked almost like he was going to come off at one point. So when you consider that he not only stayed on and scored the second goal, but he also then backed up and played this morning against Middlesbrough, it's a pretty amazing effort from him. And he's certainly proved a few wrong, including myself. I mean, I hadn't known a whole lot about him before he came here, but hearing reports that he wasn't perhaps the most physical player or he was a bit indecisive, he certainly proved me wrong in that respect.
I think he's come here obviously with a point to prove. He was on the outer in Milan and he's come here and he's done a great job. He's been outstanding for us. He has. He's putting it to his doubters. And good on him too.
Absolutely. And we had another outstanding result this morning, which is a pretty incredible result when you think we were talking last week about the fact that this is a game that would be decided by the odd goal, and there's a good chance it could be 0-0, given the way that Borough like to sit back and defend. But that was all thrown out the window within about 20 minutes, I reckon, when we went up 2-1 pretty quickly. And the fact that we scored 3 goals inside of, I think it must have been about 20 minutes, is pretty remarkable against that sort of Borough side. And there were no passengers in this game. I mean, I was a bit critical of El Mohammadi for the first goal because he pretty much assumes the ball's going out for a goal kick and doesn't even consider the fact that Negredo might be creeping in at the back post. But apart from that, everyone really stood up and looked really impressive. And we've touched on Markovic's form, and I think this was certainly his best game in the black and amber. And one thing I hadn't noticed about Markovic, and it was in the lead up to the Robertson goal as well, is how strong he can be on the ball. He seems to really hold the ball quite well, and unexpectedly so for a pretty slender player.
Yeah, I actually had made the same note myself. In that, I think he's really starting to come into himself and out of his shell. I would say like he's really he's starting to show a lot of fight and a lot more physicality than you would perhaps expect. And from what he has shown from us previously in the last few weeks in some of his earlier games. He was there were the games where he was completely lethargic and didn't show anything, but even some of the other games where he was showing some intent, he was a little bit too easy to be pushed off the ball and stuff. But he's really digging in now and really fighting, and it's great to see.
Yeah, and there was a question, I think, during the week, or it might have been last week, from I think it was Hull City Polls on Twitter, asking if we would want to sign Markovic on a permanent deal. And my first instinct was not a chance, because of how up and down his form had been, how much he... Because I've always had this perception of him as just reminding me a bit too much of Ben Arthur. But if he can produce the form that he's produced in the last 2 games, even just slightly more consistently, and we have a game against Man City where we know he loves to kind of perform on the big stage as he did at the Emirates, if he can perform more consistently, and if this goal can really kickstart his City career, then who knows where we'll be in the summer and what sort of moves we'll be discussing.
Yeah, well, I actually read something the other day, or might have been yesterday, that West Ham has put in a £16 million bid to Liverpool for his services. Which, obviously
perhaps Liverpool should be giving us a cut of that fee if we're sort of putting him in the shop window.
Yeah, that was something else that was noted about in that conversation. But I think I agree. Like Marco Silva seems to really be getting the most out of these the reject or the dud players that he's signed. No one wanted Nias, and he's on fire, and he's got to be one of the form strikers in the competition at the moment. And no one wanted Markovic because he was lazy and he was inconsistent. And now he's really starting to show his talents and what he's capable of in the Premier League. And the similar things were said about Ndiaye, and that he wasn't consistent enough, and that maybe has been shown a little bit for us, but he's still been a pretty solid performer, I would say.
Yeah, and he had one of his better games for us as well this morning. And Nias has now scored with all 4 of his on-target shots for City, which is a pretty remarkable stat in itself. But when you consider that if you add in the League Cup goal he scored against United, he's now scored in 5 of his 6 home games for us. He's becoming pretty prolific.
Yeah, and it's something that we haven't had in a little while in the Premier League. I mean, we had Hernandez was kicking him in for fun last year, but it's definitely good to have a striker of his caliber that wants to play football for Hull City.
Yeah, and just before half-time, there was probably the match's most controversial moment, which unfortunately yet again involves the referees, and we do sort of...
do we have to talk about it?
Yeah, well, the only thing I'd want to say about it is it proves why. I mean, there's a lot of debate about the need for video refereeing and that sort of thing, but I personally, when I look at that sort of situation where it's so blatant, where it's so black and white, I think the key thing that a lot of City fans unfairly criticising the referee for. I actually think Michael Oliver had a great game as the ref. There were a few calls. I think there was that Klukas got a yellow card for a tackle where I think not many people spotted the studs, and he picked it up, and I thought that was fair enough. And I thought he actually had a great game. Where he goes over to the assistant referee to confer with him about the goal. He's basically putting his trust in the assistant referee to make the decision, and he's going to stick by what the assistant referee tells him. So I don't blame Oliver for that. What I do see from the assistant referee's point of view is the assistant ref clearly thinks Ndiaye is the one that's knocked the ball back and Darun's knocked it in off him, in which case I can say that's less of a blatant error than a lot of people think it was. People look at it and say, he's just missed the fact that Darun's offside, but I think it's not as harsh as that. But nevertheless, I think that's the sort of situation that proves that a video assistant can clear that up in a second. They can just show one quick replay, line on with the ball and say, yep, ball comes back off Gibson, Darun is offside, no goal. And it can take about 10, 15, 20 seconds, which is the same amount of time that Oliver went over and conferred with the assistant referee anyway. So I don't see it as a huge hindrance to the game, and I think therefore you get the correct decision and there's no issues there. But that's my opinion, but what's your take on it?
I think bringing the video reviews and things like that. It's always it's a very complicated issue to address. But even if they didn't want to do like video review, like, you know, an ongoing video review that was always, you know, 15 seconds behind the play or whatever, that was going, oh, you know, this is not what's going on. I mean, if you could figure out a good way to do it and set it up right, I wouldn't mind, you know, like a captain's challenge or something where you could go, this is, you know, this, and, you know, this incident, you know, whatever, like that. You would go, you know, whoever's on the field would be able to go, well, that was, you know, you need to have another look at that because that was pretty wrong. But I mean, otherwise, I agree with you. I thought Oliver had a very solid game. There wasn't really, apart from that, which again, like, it's not necessarily his. It wasn't really his call. Apart from that, he didn't really have any contentious decisions.
No. So I thought that was fine. And thankfully the decision didn't end up affecting the outcome of the match, even though it did make for a nervous start to the second half. But cometh the moment, cometh the man, and we've had two defenders score their first goals for the club against West Ham, and Harry Maguire steps up and scores his first Premier League goal for us as well. So making it a trifecta within a couple of days with a pretty impressive back post header from a Robertson set piece, which was great to see as well. What did you make of Maguire's game? I mean, he stepped in as captain for the game, and he went off injured at the end, which hopefully isn't too serious. But what did you make of his first game as captain?
He was great. The stray passing from the last couple of weeks mostly disappeared. There was one or two little ones, but the ball, they kind of paid off, because I think he tried one, it didn't work, but the ball came straight back to him, and then he got to fix up his mistake. But which is a nice change from, you know, the ball just falling to their striker or something, and them running in on goal. But no, I thought he was solid, and I actually was, when I was watching the Robertson free kick, and I said to myself, just put this on Maguire's head, and he did, but it was again similar to last week, the Ranocchia goal last week. Like, it was a brilliant run, and to fade around behind the defence and get in at that back post, and a brilliant header, and a difficult one from that angle to go back across the keeper and the goal to keep it on target.
And I think it says a lot that he captained a side that won 4-2 against Gibson's side, when Gibson's the one that was called up to the England squad, but we won't be too bitter about that one. The other instance of good play from Maguire was that brilliant ball through to Grzycki for, I think it was the third goal that he set up for Hernandez.
Oh, yes.
And
yes,
that was a lovely ball.
That was a peach of a ball. It was perfect, and I mean, that's the sort of things which we're seeing, and he's starting to produce a lot more regularly, which is great for us. I don't really want to talk too much about why he's not getting picked for England, because it upsets me a little bit.
Fair enough. And then, of course, the man of the match, as dubbed in the ground, was Sam Clucas, who's having a tremendous season, and it started off with quite a lot of people raving about him, and he was being labelled the English Kante, and I think it was because he was basically playing that anchoring role in midfield at the start of the season in Huddleston's place. And he was having a tremendous start to the season, and the focus kind of went off him for a while, but particularly against Middlesbrough, I noticed him in that central midfield role again, and like Markovic, he's very strong on the ball, and if he's not strong, he knows how to position himself well to block the ball, to win the ball, to give himself some time to then feed the ball off to other people, and I thought he had a brilliant game again.
Yeah, he really did. I think, you know, when you look at where he's come from and how he was told by Leicester Academy that he was too small and he'd never play professional football, and to go away and just work hard and get to where he is, and to perform at the level that he is in the Premier League is a credit to himself and to all those that are around him. He is deceptive in so many ways when he's playing on the pitch. He's deceptively he's actually quite a lot quicker than you'd think he is, because most of the time he is playing that man in front of the defence, and you don't really have to do too much all-out sprinting. It's mostly just getting yourself in a position to block those runners. But when he actually goes for it, he's quite quick, and he has footwork that is underrated as well. As you said, he positions his body, and he knows how to work the ball to avoid a player. I thought there was actually quite a funny moment in today's game where he beat someone. I think it was Negredo had come back tracking and he
Yeah.
beat him, but Negredo slipped and Klukas was anticipating something and then turned back into him.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
But then,
Went a free kick, yeah.
then he did still, I think, retain. That's right. He got the free kick. He went down a little bit soft, but it's all right. But no, he's been outstanding.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, I mean, at lower levels he's been quite a prolific player, and I think that's the only string he needs to add to his bow to become sort of that complete Premier League midfielder. So I think at the moment he's perhaps missing a bit of attention because he's not the flashy goal-scoring midfielder, and he's more the, rolls his sleeves up and does the dirty work sort of midfielder. But I think he's certainly capable of producing a goal-scoring season as he's shown at the lower levels. So I think after this season, where he will have gotten up to speed with the Premier League, who knows what he'll produce if we're still in the Premier League next year.
Yeah, it's gonna. If we keep Silva next year, and he's gonna just bring out. I think he could take a number of our players just to that next level.
Absolutely, and the only other player I wanted to give special mention to was Hernandez, who has often been missing or been quite quiet in games, and he'll sort of bob up every now and then like he did in the Bournemouth game and score 2 goals. And today was another day like that where I was a bit surprised at the end because I didn't realise he'd been credited the assist for Markovic, but he ended the day with a goal and 2 assists to his name. So a pretty good day out at the office for him, and hopefully he's another one that the injury that he suffered wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it was great to see him get a goal as well. And as we've said about Markovic, I just hope that I hope he's still fit and he's not whatever injury he suffered wasn't too serious. But I also hope that he can get on a bit of a run now and he's got that confidence. He's been talking about trying to get those important goals, and he got one today. So hopefully that starts something.
And we could probably run through every player because there certainly weren't any passengers in the game. But we'll move on to discuss our player of the week, who's another one who I thought had a pretty... I guess today's game was a bit more of a mixed bag for him, but certainly against West Ham I thought he had quite a good game. And that's Eldin Jakupovic, who's been a quite controversial figure amongst City fans for a number of years. And Jakupovic is actually basically our longest-serving player because he was technically signed by Nick Barmby, or at least he was given a contract offer by Nick Barmby before Steve Bruce completed the signing. And it's interesting because most City fans will, of course, remember his infamous game against Sheffield Wednesday where he feigned injury after a particularly poor goalkeeping effort, as sort of assuming that as his first City game. But he actually debuted for us against Derby in a 2-1 win, so at least he got off to a winning start with us. But it was that Wednesday game that's kind of given him a bad reputation with some City fans who are still struggling to shake it. But certainly he's come on in leaps and bounds since then as he's developed at the club. And I think I remember in our first Premier League season, he was basically a cup keeper for large chunks of it. I remember him playing, I think it was against Spurs, in that penalty shootout that we mentioned last week about El Mohammadi. But he starred in a few pretty famous performances for us, first at Anfield in a 0-0 result, then at the Emirates the following season where he produced, I think it was 14 saves or 11 saves, and then this season against United at Old Trafford, again producing 7 saves. So he has his days where he's just unstoppable and unbeatable, and has really developed into a cult figure in the side. And despite starting the season as he finished last season as our number 1 with McGregor injured, Marshall sort of displaced him for a while. But he's managed to fight his way back into the team, which isn't something you'd often say about a goalkeeper. So it's testament to both his popularity amongst supporters, I suspect, and also just his efforts on the training track and in games where he really does display some pretty impressive ability sometimes. So what's your favourite memory so far of Jakupovic?
I was thinking about this. I think, honestly, I would put it as his performance in the playoff final last year. He was outstanding and pulled off some great saves to keep that as a clean sheet for us. So
I think mine would probably be the one I've already mentioned, was the performance at the Emirates, and that was probably the first game where I remember. Anfield was probably the first game where he really stepped up as a keeper, but the Emirates was the first game where he really showed his character and his and really started to gain that cult figure status, where he was playing up to the cameras a bit. When he made a particularly impressive save and checked out the replay and was kind of, playing up to the crowd about it. But I saw some footage even from today's game when I think Harry Maguire scored the fourth goal, and the he ran to the halfway line to celebrate with all of the players, and then as he was jogging back to the goal, he's revving up the crowd and really getting into it. And apart from Gomez at Watford, I can't think of too many other colourful keepers of that sort who would really get pumped up and really sort of celebrate with the crowd and with the players. So it's a really good characteristic to see and something I really enjoy having in our goalkeeper. It's a tricky question with Jakupovic because as much as we love him and as much as he is that cult figure, do you suspect that in the summer we would try and strengthen our goalkeeping stocks and sign a new number one keeper?
I don't like to say it, but I think we will. Honestly, because not that Jakupovic is weak in any way, but that is one of our weaker areas at the moment.
Which is ironic when we've got three all good first team keepers on the books.
It is rather strange. Marshall has just confused me so much this season because he's not a bad keeper, but he has performed terribly for us, and I don't know why. And I mean, if McGregor, he's back and he's fit and he's playing for Cardiff and he's doing very well, and they're talking about trying to put a bid in for him at the end of the season, which is fair enough. But I mean, if we kept McGregor and Jakupovic, I think we do need to try and add an extra quality goalkeeper. And
do you suspect we'll try and sell McGregor, keep Jakupovic, and maybe loan out Marshall and bring in somebody else? I mean, it's very difficult when we couldn't exactly shift all three of them if we wanted to sort of start again, and whether McGregor's now getting a bit too old to come back into contention for us, it becomes a bit clumsy, I guess, trying to sell both Marshall and McGregor.
Yeah, I think obviously Marshall we're probably not going to be able to sell straight away because he's on a fresh contract, and I'm not sure how long it is, but it's a tough call, but I do think that should Silva stay as head coach, that he will be looking to strengthen a number of positions, and I think adding a bit of extra quality in the goalkeeping ranks will definitely be one of his priorities.
The good thing with Jakupovic is that I do get the feeling that he's very much a club man, and his concern, I suspect, would be just the fact that I think he's on a rolling... Well, he's not on a rolling one-year contract, but I think he was on a contract where they triggered a one-year extension, and he would want some sort of long-term security on his contract, first and foremost. So I think if we offered him a fresh, 3-year deal, for instance, based on the way he's played this season, I do think he'd be more than happy to stick around and be our backup keeper because he's been at the club for so long now. He's clearly loved by the fans. He knows, I don't think there's been a season where we've had one keeper stay between the sticks for all 38 or 46 games of the season. He knows he'll get his chances and get his games, whether it's in the Cups, whether it's in a couple of Premier League or Championship games. So I do hope that if we did sign a new keeper, that Jakupovic would be happy to stick around as the number 2.
Yeah, I would think that he probably would. And on top of the things that you've stated about him being clubman and stuff, he's also at that age where he's got a young family as well, I believe, and he's at the age where he does want that stability, and not only for his own footballing purposes, but he's obviously got a family that's settled in England, so I'm sure he would like to stay there.
Absolutely. Well, we'll move on and talk about our upcoming game against Manchester City, which is a fair bit tougher than the 2 games that we faced this week, I would say. But Man City aren't without their flaws and their faults, and they're coming off a loss to Chelsea. Ironically, actually, talking about goalkeeping situations, they've, of course, faced a very similar one with Bravo and Caballero in a very similar sort of situation. Do we see this as a free hit where we've banked 6 points this week already in games we really needed to win, but coming up against Man City now, it's sort of just... if we can get a point, if we can get 3 points, it's bonus points, and we don't really need to take something from the game.
Personally, almost pretty much how I have seen it. Like, I've gone through the remaining fixtures, I've ticked off the ones that we definitely have to win, and Manchester City is there as a game that we should go out there and have a go. If we get a point, that's good. If we snag 3, then brilliant. But I'm not expecting too much, particularly considering it'll be the third game in 7 days. That's a lot to ask of anyone, but it'll be tough. But if we continue the form that we've got at the moment, we'll push them. And even like when we played them last time, we didn't end up with the result. But I think
it was 70 minutes or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. We were in the game for a long period, and then I don't remember what it was that
Robertson
triggered it.
Penalty.
Was it Robertson?
Yeah,
I was going to say it was probably a refereeing decision of some sort.
Yeah, I think that one was self-induced. But yeah, I think was it 3-0? Oh, my memory is really failing on that one. It was in that period of games where we also lost
was it
pretty
3-1?
Unfortunately to West Ham.
Was that one of the ones that Myler came on late and scored a goal?
I'm not too sure. I thought it might have been 2-0 or something like that, but it was certainly the goals did come late in that one. It was 0-0 up until 70 minutes. But yeah, I think if we hadn't taken points in either of our games against West Ham or Borough, if we'd only, say, taken 3 points or 2 points or something like that, we'd be looking at this game very differently. But as it stands, I think we can be... Relaxed is the wrong word, but it's not a do-or-die match as it might have been. But it'll be really interesting because with the 2 wins under our belts now, it gives us a bit of confidence. And 2 wins in a row is great for any team. And I think that the players would really be keen to go out there and show that they can continue that form. And there's such a bogey on us, such a weight on us that our away form is so terrible that I'm sure the players would be motivated to turn that around.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, under Silva, when we've gone up against these top teams, the results haven't always gone against us, as we've seen at Everton and Arsenal. But we've played really well against those top teams, and we've pushed them a lot. So there's a lot of potential for things to go our way in this game if we can get it right.
And I mean, I suspect even if Maguire and Hernandez were ruled fit for this game, I'd be quite inclined to give Maguire a rest and bring Dawson into the starting 11, as well as giving Hernandez either a complete rest or else bring him off the bench late in the game and just start with Nias and possibly Evandro as the front 2, with Evandro playing behind Nias. Because Evandro was another one we didn't mention for the Middlesbrough game, but he looked fantastic when he came on and really showed us what we've been missing when he's been out injured, because his passing and his ability to control the tempo of the game, it's similar in a way to what Huddleston does, but it's also quite different because his passing, whilst it's much shorter and sharper, but it still creates time and space for the players.
Yeah, Evandro's is definitely one that we have missed the last few weeks, and when we look at his first couple of performances for the club, and everyone went, "Oh, he's a bit slow and he's unfit and this and that," but he's really showing that he can play at this level. Like there's no doubt about that now, and he's creating a lot of opportunities for the players around him, which is what you want from someone who's controlling the midfield.
And what's your tip for this game?
Oh, Jesus. I think we're going to lose 2-0.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I'm hoping for something better, but I don't think we'll take points on Saturday.
I'm going to be slightly more optimistic and see it as an echo of our last trip to the Etihad in the league, where Myler scored our opening goal and we were pegged back quite late by a Milner free kick. I suspect we'll take the lead somewhere towards the end of the first half, and I think City will strike back late in the game. I'm thinking maybe Aguero or someone like that, but I think we'll get away with a 1-1 draw in that one. I feel like I'm a bit more optimistic now after those 2 wins.
Oh, well, I hope you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some pretty important fixtures coming down the line, and probably our most important away game, if we're looking at games that are winnable and that we can get points out of, is our away trip to Crystal Palace on the penultimate weekend. And we mentioned last week that we would, had something in the works that we'd be able to announce this week. And I wanted to announce to all our listeners that what we're basically going to do is Dan's going to be flying down to Sydney. Logan's going to be coming out and joining us at Cheers Bar, which is where we generally go to watch games in Sydney. And we'll be doing a live stream of a podcast, so you'll be able to see our pretty faces as we're sitting in Cheers, having a beer, chatting about City, chatting about the team that we love. And then hopefully seeing a whole bunch of Sydney-siders there, both in the build-up to the game. We'll be recording at around 5 p.m, but both in the build-up to the game and then for the game itself at midnight, because it's a game that really is going to mean a lot. The way it's shaping up, it could well be that it's a game where the loser is essentially relegated. And there's always a lot of Crystal Palace supporters who come out to cheers. So it'll be great to see as many Sydney-siders there as possible, because I think it'll be a great atmosphere. And yeah, we thought we'd try something a bit different and a bit interesting to G up the atmosphere in the lead-up. And we'll finish off by talking about our big question of the week from Facebook, where we always encourage people to submit a few questions for us to talk about on the podcast. And this one's a pretty interesting question as well, because he's a man in form, and we've already discussed him a fair bit. But Umar Niasse, on loan from Everton, who came into the club under pretty underwhelming circumstances. He didn't even have a locker at Everton. But he's scored 4 goals with his 4 shots on target, 5 goals in 6 home appearances in all competitions. But where does he rank in terms of strikers that we've had in the Premier League?
Based on what he's showing at the moment, the short answer is that he's probably the best Premier League striker that we've had. But when I was thinking about this, I thought about a few of our recent strikers
who do you classify as strikers? Because I see, for me, Giovanni, is he a striker, or would you say he's more of a winger? Because he seemed to play forward quite a bit for us back in the day, and he would be up there, I would say, as probably the one to rival. I mean, Giovanni, Niasse, and Jelavic would be the 3 that I would say have produced the most for us, based on goals per game sort of ratio in the Premier League.
Yeah, the only other one I would have considered putting into the equation was Shane Long, but we didn't really get long enough to see what he could do. He certainly went from one window to the next, and he was off to Southampton. So, but I would. I mean, honestly, if you think about goals per game, but I also like to think about the other attributes and stuff, and I think it would come down closer to Niasse and Giovanni, purely not that Jelavic was bad, but when we got him, he had a couple of injuries and he lost a bit of pace, and I think that played against him a little bit, but he still did outstanding. He worked really hard for the team.
And you can't overrate the fact that he is our all-time record Premier League goal scorer. So that does have to count for him somewhat. Yeah.
This is another one of those questions that can get you. It's a tough one to call. I think that I said Niasse, but now we're talking about it more, and you're putting questions to me. I could just as easily put it as a 3-way tie, to be honest. Now.
Well, I think it's a difficult question to answer at this stage, because Niasse has only played 10 games for us or something similar, and a lot of those have been off the bench as well. So I think it's a question that maybe we would revisit in 12 months, assuming that we stay up and he signs on a permanent deal, because once he's permanently our player, once he's actually had a pre-season, he's played a full season for us, and we get to see what he's like over the course of a season, I think that's a better time to be able to reflect on his output. I think Jelavic probably takes the cake for me, purely because of the fact that I'd put him slightly ahead of Giovanni, because Giovanni always seemed to shrivel up a bit when it got cold, and he sort of stopped producing over the winter months. And as good as his goals were, Jelavic scored a few pretty decent goals himself. I mean, there was that goal at Newcastle at the start of our second Premier League season, and I think he scored a brace against, I think it was Cardiff in our first season when we beat them 4-0. So Jelavic probably edges it for me just because of his output and his consistency over the whole season. But yeah, I reckon revisit in 12 months if we've still got Nias, and it could be a very different conversation.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong.
Well, on that note, I think we'll call it quits there. So thanks very much for coming on, Dan.
That's all right, mate. I think it's just about ready for bedtime. I think my brain's going. I'm losing my words.
It's been a very long day. I think we've been up for about 16 or 17 hours straight as it stands, up at 4:30 in the morning to watch City. But the results certainly made it worth it with a brilliant 4-2 win over Middlesbrough, as well as the news that our Facebook group's hit 700 members. So that was great to see as well. So thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you everyone for being part of the Hull City Australia community and supporting us and growing with us and supporting the club. So until next time, come on City! You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're Amber